All right, let's get into it. Today, we're tackling one of the biggest questions in tech, maybe the biggest question. How do we build an AI that's not just smart, but, well, good? And who on earth gets to decide what good even means in the first place? And let's just jump right into the fire, shall we? This comment from a Hacker News discussion, it just gets right to the heart of the fear, doesn't it? When we try to make an AI safe or ethical, are we actually just teaching it to be a more convincing liar? One that's just guided by, well, whatever the current flavor of political correctness is instead of the truth?
And that's really the fundamental challenge we're unpacking today. It's this incredible balancing act. We need AI to be helpful, to actually follow our instructions and be useful. But at the same time, we desperately need to stop it from causing harm. And as you'll see, those two goals can sometimes be in a direct tug-of-war.
So let's break this down. This inner conflict, it's right at the core of AI alignment. It really comes down to a constant push and pull between two very simple but often competing commands.
So on one side, you've got helpful. Pretty straightforward, right? The AI should answer your question, write your code, summarize that document. It has to work. But on the other side, you've got harmless. The AI shouldn't spew hateful stuff, it shouldn't promote illegal acts, it shouldn't be horribly offensive. The tricky part is sometimes being 100% helpful might get you dangerously close to being harmful, and being 100% harmless might just mean the AI refuses to be helpful at all.
Now, here's where it gets kinda wild. This observation is fascinating. RLHF, that's reinforcement learning from human feedback, it's the main way companies use human raters to teach an AI to be more harmless. But this commenter, they're pointing to data that suggests this whole safety training process actually made the base GPT-4 model worse at telling if its own information was accurate. Think about that. In the process of making it safer, they may have accidentally made it a little less truthful.
So how do we fix this mess? Well, one of the big ideas gaining traction is to stop giving the AI vague guidelines and instead give it a very clear, explicit rulebook to follow.
And this idea has a name, Constitutional AI, or CAI. And honestly, it's pretty brilliant. Instead of having an army of humans giving a thumbs up or thumbs down to every single AI response, you give the AI a constitution. A set of principles like be helpful, or choose the response that is less harmful, and you teach the AI to judge itself against those rules.
And here's how that works. First, the AI generates a response, just a first draft. Then, it critiques its own answer based on the Constitution. It asks itself things like, hey, was I being evasive there? Did I take a side on a sensitive topic? Then, it actually rewrites the response based on that self-critique. And the final step, you train a brand new model on thousands and thousands of these self-corrected examples. You're basically teaching the AI to be its own ethics editor.
Okay, so giving an AI a rulebook makes sense, but what if a model is already out there, already trained on human preferences? How do you figure out what hidden rules it's already following? Well, to do that, we have to become AI detectives.
This brings us to something called inverse constitutional AI. It's exactly what it sounds like, the reverse of what we just saw. You take a massive data set of human choices, where people said they liked answer A more than answer B, and the algorithm works backward to figure out the hidden constitution, the set of principles that best explains why people made those choices.
But this technique had some interesting growing pains. The research found that the first versions of this came up with principles that were just way too specific. For instance, it might analyze one conversation and spit out a rule like this one about a particular brand of hot sauce. That's not exactly a universal ethical principle you can build a global AI on, right?
So the researchers had to get smarter. Instead of looking at conversations one by one, they started grouping similar human preferences together. They clustered all these different choices based on things like their content, their style, their sentiment. And by doing that, they could suddenly pull out much broader, much more useful principles that actually applied across tons of different situations.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. Because once you have these tools for both writing and discovering AI rules, you're faced with a massive question. And it's not a technical question at all, it's a societal one. I mean, think about it. Should it be a handful of engineers in a room in Silicon Valley who get to write the moral code for an AI that billions of people might use? Or should this be a much more democratic process?
And that is the core idea behind collective constitutional AI. It's a framework for taking that technical process we've been talking about and cracking it wide open to public input, letting a large group of everyday people actually deliberate and write the constitution that's going to guide an AI's behavior.
And look, this isn't just some simple online poll. It's a really serious, well-structured process. You can see here, it starts with carefully selecting a representative group of people. It moves through a process for them to submit and vote on principles. Then they have to turn all that input into a real constitution. And finally, they train and evaluate the new model. It's the whole shebang.
So to put this idea to the test, researchers actually ran a huge experiment. They brought together a representative sample of 1,002 U.S. adults to create what they called the public constitution.
So, what happened? What does an AI that's been aligned by 1,000 regular people actually look and feel like?
Well, one of the most fascinating differences was just in the vibe and how the models handled tough subjects. The standard model, the one trained by the developers, would often just shut down and refuse to answer. But the model trained on the public's constitution, it was much more likely to actually engage with the topic, but it would try to reframe it in a more constructive or positive way.
And the hard numbers? They were even more striking. Just look at this table. The public model showed significantly lower social bias on a standard industry test. But here's the absolute kicker. It did that while performing at the exact same level on major tests for things like reasoning and math. They made it less biased without making it any less smart.
So this brings us all the way back to that big central question. But now we're armed with some really powerful new data and a totally new way of thinking about how to answer it.
But, it's not a solved problem, not by a long shot. This comment raises such a deep point. A democratic process can tell us what a majority of people find acceptable at this moment in time. But is that really the same thing as what is truly ethical? I mean, history is just littered with examples where the majority was on the completely wrong side of that question.
So when you boil it all down, this whole journey, from a niche technical tool to this big public deliberation process, it shows one thing really clearly. Aligning AI with our values isn't just a coding problem for engineers to solve in a lab. It is a deep, complex, and probably ongoing societal challenge that's going to require input from all of us.
So we're going to leave you with this to chew on. If you had the power to write one single, unbreakable rule that a powerful AI had to follow, what would it be? What's the one value you think is the most important to bake into the code of our new digital minds? Thanks for tuning in.